life of a really great Sephardi rabbi, one that really has a huge heart in British Jewry and British Jewish history, Jewish relations, without a doubt. It's a Tisha B'Av special over here. Rabbi Menasseh ben Israel. Very great rabbi. He was actually born in the year 1604 and 1657 he passed away. So why is he so important? We're going to see that he actually is going to make connections and build bridges and start the path process for the Jewish people to move back to England in the mid-1600s. We can explore that. Let's just have a background of what exactly happened when the British Jews were expelled. There was an edict of expulsion back in 18th of July 1290 this was. It was a royal decree expelling the Jews from the Kingdom of England at the time, and it was reported over to have been issued by Edward I on the 18th of July in 1290. It was reported over, it was the first time a European state was known to permanently ban their presence. And why was it so significant, what this state, why I'm speaking about it here on Tisha B'Av? Because the date that it was chosen, this edict, was on the 9th of Av. It was reported over Tisha B'Av. Also, we know that the Jewish people had many calamities fall upon them on that specific date, as I've related in other videos, also where the two temples got destroyed. There was other incidents, 5 things that the Gemara actually relates over. This was not included because it was written, this actually occurred way after Talmudic time period, but it was the 9th of Av. We know it commemorates destruction of Jerusalem and other disasters unfortunately the Jewish people have experienced. So Edward told the sheriffs, it was reported over, of all counties, he wanted the Jewish people expelled before All Saints' Day. This was on the 1st of November of that specific year. It was reported over, just as a background, that the Jewish people were allowed to leave with cash and personal possessions, but outstanding debts, homes and other buildings, including synagogues and cemeteries, were forfeit to the king. So this was reported over. This would go on, this decree, I believed, till the mid-1650s, and that's where Rabbi Menasseh ben Israel is going to very much come in. So let's explore the life of the great rabbi, the Menasseh ben Israel, respectively, and because much can be related over within regards to the great Chacham. Okay, friends, he was known as his Hebrew name, Menasseh ben Israel, rabbi, naturally. Also, it was Hebrew acronym of MBY, Mem Bet Yud, or MBI. And we'll know that he was a great Jewish scholar. He was a rabbi. He was a Kabbalist also. He was a writer. He was a great diplomat. He was a printer, a publisher, and the founder of the first Hebrew printing press. Reported over, I think this was called the Emet Meretz Titzmach. I think this was actually in Amsterdam in the year 1626, if I am not mistaken. So now let's explore a bit about his family heritage just before we explore about him. So obviously we know that he was one of the great Sephardic Jewish people that came from Holland. And his father actually was reported over, had 3 times or several times escaped death in Lisbon in Portugal. This was for, I would recommend everyone to research about what happened over there. Poor and broken in body and spirit, he then had settled in Amsterdam. So he moved from Lisbon, escaping life several occasions, and then moved to Amsterdam in the Netherlands, in Holland, and started life anew. He started afresh. He started life from scratch. We know that Menasseh, his son, to whom he had given the best possible education in Sephardic tradition, we knew that he was going to be destined to play an important role as a great author with regards to Torah works and as a spokesman for the Jewish people, where we are going to learn about. He actually learned himself, Rav Menasseh did, under Chacham Isaac Uziel. I think this was a newly established yeshiva in Amsterdam, and was doing brilliantly in his Torah studies, in thorough knowledge of the Torah. And I think only at the age of 18 years old, he was appointed to the Rabbinical Council of Amsterdam, which consisted of 4 members at that point in time. This was absolute phenomenal. He was actually born himself, Rabbi Menasseh, in La Rochelle. La Rochelle is, I think, a city on the west coast of France, if I'm not mistaken. He was born over there. This was in the year 1604. And the family itself moved to the Netherlands in 1610. We said about how the family moved. It was in the year 1610. So at this stage in time, he himself would have only been 6 years of age. At that point in time, I think Netherlands itself was in the middle of a process of a religious revolt against Catholic Spanish rule throughout the 80 Years' War. I think this was between the year 1568 to 1648, respectively. And it was at this point in time, Amsterdam was very important to the center of Jewish life in Europe at this point in time. So they arrived in the year 1610, and it was during the 12 years of truce mediated by France and England at The Hague, if I'm not mistaken. In Amsterdam, he studied also under, we spoke about Rav Uziel, also Rabbi Moses Raphael de Aguilera, who was a great Sephardic Dutch rabbi. I think he was a Hebrew grammarian and wrote more than 20 books on various different topics. This great rabbi did respectively. We spoke about how at the age of 18 he was appointed in the Rabbinical Council, which was a phenomenal feat. He didn't just become a great rabbi, he was an author also, but he also became a printer. He established the first Hebrew press in Holland. One of his earliest works is El Conciliador. I think it was published in the year 1632, and it won a great reputation. I think this book itself tried to reconcile discrepancies in various parts of the Torah, if I'm not mistaken, a Hebrew Bible. Among his correspondents there were various people, including Hugo Grotius, Petrus Serius, Antonio Vieira, and Pierre Daniel Huet, and many other people also. So this was as he went into printing. We spoke about he became very great with regards to his sermons also, and especially in the world center of Sephardic Jewry at that point in time. It's actually interesting. He's famed as a scholar and as an expert in all matters of learning, and science spread far beyond Holland. Some of the greatest scholars of the world sought his friendship. So we spoke about the other people. It's even reported of the Queen of Sweden, Christina, who happened to be the daughter of Gustav Adolf, the painter Rembrandt, and the statesman and philosopher Hugo Grotius, who we spoke about before, were among some of the non-Jewish correspondents and friends he made. He had huge secular knowledge and fame, and Menasseh ben Israel devoted much of his time and interest with regards to Jewish Judaica studies and to the defense of the Torah against many of the critics. There were many critics at that point in time. It's reported over that one of his distant relatives was a famous Rabbi Isaac Abarbanel. He wrote a 4-volume work in which he refuted the attacks from within and without, it's reported over, and cleared up the misunderstandings caused, let's say, by the so-called, Torah or Bible critics. Rabbi Menasseh wrote many other memoranda for the defense of the principles of the Jewish faith also, such as the resurrection of dead and the divine origin and nature of the soul. It was all comprised in a specific colossal Torah work called the Nishmat Chayim. He had great knowledge of Kabbalah, and it helped him very much in reaffirming the belief in the times of Mashiach, which hopefully we're going to see now ASAP. It was interesting. There was poverty issues at that point in time, I think all across the world. And poverty caused Rabbi Menasseh ben Israel to turn his attention, at least temporarily, to practical business. He had to work in business. So, as we said before, he established first printing press in Holland and was the father of the great printing and publishing tradition of Amsterdam. Amsterdam had produced many great Torah colossal works and Jewish colossal works also, as we'll see through the days. It stemmed some of the best editions from the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, the Tanakh, as we call it, and the Gemara, the Talmud also, the Shas, and many other important volumes of Hebrew Torah, Hebrew content, Hebrew literature. It eventually became a flourishing business. It's reported over it wasn't so sufficient during Rabbi Menasseh ben Yisrael's time to help him support his family himself, but later on it will grow into something much better in a financial perspective. He planned to emigrate, reported over to Brazil at one stage in time, to found a new home in that distant part of the world. Let's say, fortunately, the Jewish people of Amsterdam realized, the greatness of the great rabbi over there, and did not let him go. Under the leadership of the rich Maranos Abraham and Israel Pereira Perer era. They collected funds and made Rabbi Menashe ben Yisrael's position an adequate source of support for him and his family. He was very, very valuable to the place itself. And we're going to see, oh boy, he'd become one of the most important orators and greatest rabbis in Jewish history, arguably. For Rabbi Menashe, he earned his greatest merits as a spokesman for all Jewish people out there. He used the friendships he had, especially with the monarchy, especially with Queen Christina of Sweden, to induce her to consider the opening of Scandinavia as a haven of refuge for thousands of Jewish refugees who were still wandering from country to another at that stage in time. They were unfortunately driven from place to place, deprived of possessions. There were very cruel rulers at that point in time that really caused a lot of huge anti-Semitism and death. He almost succeeded, it was reported over, but when Christina, let's say, abdicated, or she was abdicated from the throne, I think at that stage in time, obviously, problems within regards to this vision had maybe aroused. However, Rav Menashe ben Israel did not abandon all the hopes for providing new havens for the Jewish community, for world Jewry in his attention then centered to England, and this is where we're coming to it. We talked about how the edict started in the year 1290 on Tisha B'Av. So now he's actually coming to England over here, where I think at that point in time, the Puritans had come to the foreground and had shown friendliness towards the Jews at that point in time. This was maybe an opportune moment for him. It was a right time for Jewish people, as they were readmittance to Britain was going to be crucial for them. And we see now in England alone, there's between 250,000 to 300,000 Jews. From what they were expelled in the year 1290. It was reported over in the year 1650, Rav Menashe sent a petition to the English Parliament to officially grant the readmission of Jewish people. This was in the year 1650. We're talking about 360 years after this edict was appointed. He dedicated to it his manuscript called The Hope of Israel over here. Rav Menashe then expressed the desire, let's say, to be permitted to visit England and defend in person the cause of the Jewish nation over there. To come in person, when you come in person, it's all hearsay and messages and telegrams and stuff like that. It's not the same quality when you come in person. He wants to come in person and bring about this vision. Permission was then granted to him, but I think there was hostilities at that point in time between England and the Netherlands and Holland, and that postponed his trip to Britain for more than 5 years. So the will was there in the year 1650. However, because of external issues from this matter, that was delayed. And then I think it was in October 1655, Rav Menashe ben Israel landed actually in London. After he actually arrived, he was actually met the famous man, Oliver Cromwell. He was, let's just say, the strong man of England at that point in time. A memorandum in which he refuted the prejudices against Jews and pointed out the advantages that England could derive from granting them permission to resettle in England and live according to the commandments of their religion over here at this point in time. It's just how great the oratory skills to do this and to negotiate this and to persuade this. 365 years at that stage in time since the edict is absolutely incredible. Oliver Cromwell at that point in time sponsored the petition warmly. He actually took kindly to it. But unfortunately, I think at that point in time, the British clergy and the wealthy, let's say, merchants at that stage in time who were afraid of competition did everything in their power to prevent its realization. In order to clear, let's say, his brethren from the flood of false accusations brought up by their enemies, Rav Menashe ben Israel wrote his famous Salvation of the Jews. It was a colossal work in which he praised the faith and the courage of the Jewish people throughout their history, because there's so much great courage. What a nation Am Yisrael is. We stood on Har Sinai and said Na'aseh v'nishma after 40 years wandering in the before the 40 years we were wandering in the wilderness. We accepted the Torah unequivocally, and despite all the treacherous slavery in Egypt, all the anti-Semitism that had been caused, the destruction of the Bet HaMikdashes, the first Mikdash, the atrocities of Beitar, the Bar Kokhba period, the expulsion of the Jews just throughout, and still to have the Spanish Inquisition, and how great the Jewish people is that we're still standing strong at that point in time. So he wrote this book, The Salvation of Jews, in which he praised the faith and courage of Jewish people throughout the history. The great number of Jewish martyrs who died Kiddush Hashem, let's say sanctification of Hashem's name, since the Jews began the migration in the diaspora, was the best proof for that. Rabbi Menashe ben Israel actually wrote. It's actually interesting. Rav Menashe ben Israel succeeded eventually, and Oliver Cromwell granted many individual Jews at that point in time the right to settle in London. Rav Menashe himself was reported over to be honoured by the British protector and sent off with a farewell present of an annual stipend reported over 100 sterling pounds. However, on the way back to Amsterdam after, let's say, a very, very seemingly successful trip, the great defender of the Jewish faith and the Jewish people, unfortunately, passed away. He was laid to rest at the Jewish cemetery in Amsterdam later on. This was, I believe, in the year 1657. This was in. But much more we can, that was in a nutshell over there. But we know that he passed away. This happened in February 1657 when he was granted a state pension of £100. And he didn't actually enjoy any of that because he passed away in the winter of 1657. In the winter, I believe he was. It's interesting. His grave is the Bet Haim of Ouderkerk and De Amstel. I think this is in the Netherlands, respectively. And so I believe he was buried over there. I think this is the oldest Jewish cemetery in the Netherlands, if I am not mistaken. This was in the year 1657. So they would, okay. There's much more we can say within regards to this, because eventually they would, after 1657, they would actually be allowed to come back in properly. They will. I think the Jews began to settle, as we said before, in the year 1656, very much from Rome, and formal equality was only achieved by the year 1858. So we're talking about 202 years after that, if I'm not mistaken. So it did take for full equality to come in bound an extra 200 years after this, which has to be pointed over. Rabbi Menashe ben Israel. So let's explore some of the works that he had done. It's we know that he was in London between the years 1656 1657. We spoke about his book over there within regards to that, the great work he did. One thing I want to add also is that when he actually did leave Amsterdam, it was hugely seen. When he moved to London, it made a huge effect on the Jewish community in Amsterdam also at that point in time, because it just shows how valuable he was to the Sephardi Jewry and to world Jewry also, and how important he was for the Jewish community of the Netherlands, respectively. So he himself was author of many works. Let's look at some of the works that he wrote, and then we'll look at some of the descendants, the great descendants he had. He was author. His major work, as we stated before, was Nishmat Chaim, which is a treatise in Hebrew on the Jewish concept of reincarnation of souls. This would be published by his son, Samuel, 6 years before they both passed away. Some Torah scholars and scholars in general think that he studied Kabbalah with Abraham Cohen de Herrera, who was actually a disciple of the Rabbi Yisrael Saruk Ashkenazi, or Rabbi Yisrael Saruk Ashkenazi, who was a famous student of the famous Isaac Luria, the Ari HaKadosh also. This would explain his familiarity with the method of Isaac Luria, the great rabbi, one of the great Tzfat rabbis, who actually he was his Hilula on the 5th of Av, just a few days before Tisha B'Av. Then the next book we want to talk about is the Conciliator, which we spoke about, a work written to reconcile the apparent contradictions, let's just say, in numerous passages throughout the Torah, respectively. He achieved this aim. Rabbi ben Israel utilized, let's say, an astounding range of sources, primarily from the Gemara itself and the classic Jewish commentaries, but he quotes various authorities, including Greek and Latin authors, I think Christian ones also, and I think it was written in Spanish and in Amsterdam in 1632. It was aimed primarily to strengthen the faith of the Marranos in the veracity of the Torah Nevi'im and Ketuvim according to Jewish interpretation. I think it was translated also by Elias Chaim Lindo and published by Duncan and Malcolm in the year 1842. And again, it will have another printing in 1972, only 52 years ago from time of recording of it now. Other works included the De Termino Vitae, which I think was in Latin in the year 1639, translated, I think, later in English by Thomas Bocock. Then there was De Creation Problemata. I think it was written in Latin once again in the year 1635, and there was English translations towards that. Then there was a De Resurrection Mortuorum. I think it was a book in the year 1636. I think originally once again written in Spanish. In the De La Fragilidad Humana, printed in the year 1642. Remember, he was a printer also himself. He had a publisher and he was a printer. Then there was Nishmat Chaim in Hebrew, that was published in a ritual compendium of the Thesaurus Dos Dinim, and then there was Piedra Gloriosa, which was 4 engraved etchings by, I think, by his acquaintance Rembrandt, who is also thought by some to have painted his portrait. These are, I think, actually currently in the British Museum. It was reported over somewhere. Then another colossal great work was A Hope of Israel. I think it was printed in the year 1652 in London by Lucian Wolff, if I'm not mistaken. I think other printings and versions was made. Then there was a Vindicia Judaeorum, which was, I think, a letter in answer to certain questions propounded by noble and learned gentlemen, touching reproaches. I think this was actually printed in Amsterdam in the year 1656. And I think other works can be found in the Biblioteca Nacional do Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, for example. I think there was various books. Now let's look at some of his descendants. He himself was a great personality. We said that, I think it was Rav Menashe's wife, Rachel, Rabbanit Rachel, was a descendant of the famous Abarbanel family. Rav Menashe had 3 children by her. According to the family legend, the Abarbanels were descendants of King David HaMelech, and he was proud of his children's Davidic dynasty, let's say. Both of Rabbi Menashe's sons predeceased their father. Rabbi Menashe's elder son was Samuel Abarbanel So'ira, also known as Samuel ben Israel, who also worked, reported over as a printer, and assisted his father with matters in England. He himself died in the year 1657, and Rabbi Menashe's younger son, Joseph, died only at the age of 20. At the age of 20 in the year 1650. Unfortunately, I think it was reported over, there was a disastrous business trip in Poland that happened. Rav Menashe's also had a daughter, Garcia, that was born in the year 1626. She married Samuel Abarbanel Bar Bozo in the year 1646. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he or she died in the year 1690. It's also reported over another descendant was Moses Jacob Ezekiel. He became an American sculptor. In his autobiography, he claims to be a descendant of Rav Menashe ben Israel. But I think at this stage, his, according to the source I'm reading from here on Wikipedia itself, it's not confirmed, this actual information in of itself. So Mr. Ezekiel, I think, passed away in the year 1917. So whether this is true or not, someone can find any proper evidence within regards to this, I will appreciate it. Also, he passed away himself, Rav Menashe did, on March, Rav Menashe ben Israel, he passed away, I believe, as we stated before, in the year 1657. This would have been on the 20th of November. He was only aged about 52 to 53 years of age. And we said he was buried in the famous Jewish cemetery in North Holland, I think, in over there, if I'm not mistaken. He was buried over there. That's his resting place over there. The great rabbi. And please, when it comes to his yard site, please light candles in his memory. But I thought it would be informative. It's special here because I'm recording this at the time of Tisha B'Av, 9th of Av. We're exploring how the Jews, the edict came about and the Jews were expelled on the 9th of Av, and how they had come about. And very much, Rabbi Menashe ben Israel has a huge, huge part in British Jewry, British history, Jewish history, and how he used all his talents to bring back the Jewish people to England. So wishing you all a safe fast. May we see the rebuilding of the third Beit HaMikdash now, Be'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach, and just blessings from Israel. And take care.